I feel that this is history repeating itself almost exactly. Not only because of we are fortunate from Bigfoot experience in that the improved communications and modern technology has afforded us a second chance. You know, everything that has transpired here is exactly history repeating itself. The way I feel about it spiritually is Bigfoot spirit is still here and his people's spirits are still here and very much alive. And I believe that they are in fact the ones protecting us. We are suffering the same hardships they suffered: starvation, hunger, inadequate shelter, inadequate warmth, same inclement type weather, the same harassment surrounded by much more firepower than they had, the fact that they were forced to surrender and give up all their arms and then were massacred. See, we're not going to make that the same mistake. If they're going to massacre us, we're going to take some people with us. Now, we provided the forum here for the Sioux people to address their redress of grievances, you know. And at that time, it's the 1868 Sioux Treaty or nothing. Originally, the Civil Rights Organization of the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Interdistrict Council and the Landowners Association, all three which represent anywhere from 80 to 85% of the total Indian population of the reservation, asked us to come in to help them provide a forum for their redress of grievances. They had previously been involved in an internal struggle with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the tribal government, of which they illegally were prevented from a redress of their grievances. So consequently, the court of last resort in Indian country has always been the American Indian Movement. And therefore, we were asked to come in, the first time ever to come in on a reservation. And we came here, met for 2 days with the traditional tribal chiefs and the holy men of this reservation. Met with them for 2 days. At 7:30 p.m. on February 27th, it was decided to come into Wounded Knee, and we were here within the hour.
And your plans were what?
Our plans at that time was to ask that the High Interior Department officials come here to negotiate with us, along with the senators. The senators came. The Interior Department officials refused to, and that was to create immediate change that Indian people could feel and see insofar as the land is concerned, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is concerned, and the tribal government is concerned.
You mentioned earlier that you met with the traditional tribal chiefs here, but you didn't mention Dick Wilson. He's not one of the traditional leaders.
No, he isn't. The traditional leaders are hereditary and appointed by the communities themselves. People like Iron Cloud, Red Cloud, Fool's Crow, Kill's Enemy. These are the traditional chiefs that have come down from the last century.
One of the things that you would like to see is the ouster of Dick Wilson. Is that correct?
That is a mute question now.
So how long do you see Wounded Knee continuing as it is now? What is it going to take before there is something definite done for the Indian at Wounded Knee?
Wounded Knee will not be over until either they, one, massacre us, two, address our treaty rights by law, according to United States law.
What do you think is going to be necessary to do to get the Department of the Interior and the Bureau to recognize your aims and your goals?
We're no longer dealing with the Department of Interior. We're no longer dealing with any of the subordinate departments of the federal government. According to our treaty rights, we are to deal with the President of the United States and or his designated representative, which has power over Justice, Interior, or HEW, or anyone else. And this is whom we have asked that Hank Adams be appointed by the President to be this negotiator our special supervisor, as it's worded in our treaty rights.
You want the president, his office, to negotiate with you. Would you be satisfied with President Nixon putting his signature on a document, making promises to look into the grievances? Would you be satisfied with that?
Definitely not. President Nixon lied to us once before when we left Washington, D.C. in November. Now, each one of those conditions were abrogated, that agreements we reached with him in White House negotiations, and also the reply to our 20-point solution problem to the government's problem in Indian affairs was answered in the most ambiguous manner that I think history can record. No, Nixon's going to have to come across with more than promises. He has to come across with results.
Is it true that you've declared this area a separate nation from the United States government?
The Indian people have always had sovereignty. It's been a quasi-sovereignty as defined by the Supreme Court of the United States, that we are, in fact, dependent domestic nations. However, we feel that we can, based on our land holdings, we are independent, we can and will be independent nation. We're just going based on the 1868 treaty, which makes us an independent nation. Now, until that treaty is addressed to, we will remain here in Wounded Knee.
Now, if you're a separate nation, will you want any kind of federal aid?
Where were they? Oh, no, I don't know.
No, only in terms of what the diplomats arrange, foreign aid or whatever.
But mainly you want your land back. How much land?
The land question has to be resolved in extended treaty negotiations about our treaty rights. Now, western South Dakota from the east bank of the Missouri River, according to our treaty, is our land. That has to be settled.
So do you see other Wounded Knees if a settlement isn't reached here?
I see other Wounded Knees going to continue until the United States addresses itself to the treaty rights of Indian people all over the United States. This is one of 371 treaties ratified by the Congress of the United States, which make them the law of the land, equal to and on par with the Constitution of the United States of America.
What if the demands are not met? Then you're going to be here for a long time. This armed conflict or this confrontation is going to continue indefinitely.
I feel that the Justice Department in the United States of America, we have at this time emissaries visiting the Organization of American States, in fact making personal ambassadors, if you will, going to Mexico City and to Guatemala, Chile, Argentina, Cuba, and other countries within the Organization of American States. Also, we have diplomats at the United Nations that are trying to get our treaty heard in the United Nations.
Are you looking for foreign aid from these countries, or just to get your side of the story across?
Initially, we're looking for diplomatic recognition from these countries around the world.
Early in the occupation, you're quoted as saying that you're willing to die here at Wounded Knee. Is this still the case?
Definitely. As I stated, they either massacre us or recognize our treaty. And President Nixon, when he made that treaty with North Vietnam, stated via satellite TV to the world that the United States would live up to all its treaty commitments that it has already made. And we construed that to state that he would also live up to the Indian treaties. So consequently, you see, one thing you can't get the Indian to understand is how they can make a treaty with North Vietnam and pour in billions of dollars of reparation, and at the same time disregard the treaties made with Indian people and withdraw millions of dollars from the congressional allocations and appropriations.
Russell, what has been the situation with your group and with authorities here at Wounded Knee?
Situation here is they're still talking about how they can get us into prison without killing us. That's all the negotiations that have gone on so far. We've had, of course, promise after promise by the Justice Department that supplies would be let in, which hasn't happened. Those promises have been broken, which is par for the course. Also, that people would not be arrested, arbitrarily and indiscriminately, and yet that continues to go on. So consequently, we have broken off negotiations until such time as they can deal with our treaty rights.
What about the reports of exchanges of gunfire that we hear about here at the Siege of Wounded Knee?
That happens every night. The federal government, of course, claims we fire first, which that claim is asinine. It's beyond belief. Our sentries along our borders are given 10 rounds of ammunition apiece each night because we haven't that much ammunition. And besides that, it would be foolhardy, to say the least, for us to attempt to militarily engage the most powerful country militarily in the history of mankind.
They haven't allowed us to bring them down the federally controlled highway. We've asked for medicines and things, and they've let us bring in stuff like aspirin and Band-Aids, and said, okay, well, we let them have medical supplies. We ask for food for our people, and they give, they say, well, here, we'll give you 5 pounds of flour today and maybe 5 pounds of beans tomorrow, if you're lucky, if you're still there, and, spread that out among your people, man, and it just don't work out.
You don't have a weapon with you right now. Do you normally carry a weapon?
Yes, when I'm on duty.
Have you fired at the federal people before?
I can't answer that question. I have been fired upon by the federal people several times. I was next to the medic that got shot. And things like this, are common, it happens every night.
Do you feel there's much greater danger of injury, possibly death, to someone in these incidents as the siege continues?
Well, last night, for example, this .30 caliber shell right here ricocheted within the Church of God, where we keep a lot of the women and children, where they sleep at night. .30 caliber weapon. This is an M16 that was dug out of a wall of the other church, the little white church down here. And here's a .32 expended slug that was found near the church. So, yes, I definitely believe there's going to be injury. We've had 3 woundings already. 1 medic and 2 Oglala Sioux have been wounded.
Do you think the government is definitely trying to provoke an incident of gunfire and bloodshed here in this area?
Oh, yes, that's part of the game. Also, part of their game is to expend our ammunition. They fire in these .30 caliber slugs, anti-personnel weapons that are illegal according to the Geneva Convention. It's .30 caliber. It's supposed to be used for aircraft. Instead, they're using it as anti-personnel. These also, if we, happen to, in the exchange of gunfire, kill a federal officer, that would give them all the excuse they need to just come in and massacre us. So I know that there's a plan behind their firing.
So the Indians here aren't shooting first?
Like I said, it would be foolhardy. And it's even ludicrous to suggest that we would. We have a certain amount of intelligence, and when you see armored personnel carriers surrounding you, and men with M16 and all automatic weapons, and helicopters, that'd be a form of suicide. Now, we're willing to die. We're not afraid of death, but we don't want to be killed. We would rather have our treaty rights recognized.
Federal grand juries in Sioux Falls have returned some 54 indictments against the occupation forces here at Wounded Knee, and in late April or early April, more indictments may be coming down. Do you fear the federal recourse for your actions here?
According to our treaty rights, they haven't any business.
Yeah.
That's like indicting Arabs in Egypt because they're involved with Israel. You know, we're another country. They haven't any jurisdiction over us.
But you don't fear going to court. I believe you're quoted as saying in one of the magazines, in one of the weekly magazines, give us our day in court. Would you like that day in court?
Personally, I only speak for myself. If everyone else would be given amnesty, I guess is the word, I'd be more than willing to go to court. I believe that would be an excellent forum.
So to settle the matter now, you would be willing to go to court and explain your side of the story or take whatever federal action would be put against you?
Right, provided I had enough of the bond money, or that $500,000 or so they're going to slap on me.
How do you react to concern or criticism, I guess, by some unnamed people that actually AIM is more interested in AIM advancement than the welfare of the Indian themselves, or in individual AIM advancement?
AIM stands for the American Indian Movement. It does not state a specific tribe or a specific group of people. We represent a fact of Indian life. In every strata of Indian society, we have AIM membership. We represent a fact of Indian life. The only forum we have available to us for our grievances is the media. And we try to use that media. Yes, we are for the advancement of the American Indian movement insofar as ridding ourselves of corrupt tribal government, the corrupt and lethargic Bureau of Indian Affairs, and its cumbersome bureaucracy, and the fact that we were, and first and foremost, to get our treaties back in the forefront of negotiations with the United States of America. All 371 that are ratified by the Congress of the United States, and also the unratified treaties, which is the next step.
There is criticism from the press that you have prolonged the occupation here to gain more publicity.
We've prolonged the occupation here because of our treaty rights and our lives. And as far as publicity goes, yes, the American Indian needs media cooperation for a redress of our grievances. We do not have 20 million people that can effectively lobby in Washington, D.C. We do not have corporations or any kind of monetary power whatsoever or influence. Look what happened to the Alaska Natives, and they own the oil. They're getting less than 1% of what's going to come out of their oil. So you see, we do need media coverage for a redress of our grievances.
Just how
Go ahead, Bud.
Just how widespread do you think your support is among the American Indians across the nation?
Almost total, and it even reaches into almost every foreign country in the world, our support. We received over 30 telegrams yesterday via Rapid City. I know we have much more, but we only got 30 of them that are from 30 different foreign countries expressing their support.
Getting back to the media, do you feel the media coverage of Wounded Knee has been fair? Or how would you evaluate the coverage of Wounded Knee at this stage?
Initially, yes, I thought the media coverage was more than fair. However, when the primary issue of our existence as Indian people, as sovereign Indian people, which is based on our treaties, this is not getting out. And the fact that the government has suspended the Constitution of the United States all the way to the California-Nevada border, the Illinois border, the New York State border, where they're arresting people because they're just traveling to Wounded Knee, and they're trumped up charges. The whole suspension of our civil liberties as Indian people across the nation have been suspended.
Why the lack of understanding do you feel about the treaty question?
The United States government and its people have effectively isolated Indian people and filed away our treaties for over a century and more. Consequently, the United States government neither has any explanation if they massacre us based on our treaty rights, and they haven't any answers for us if they negotiate us over our treaty rights. Right now, I imagine that in Washington, D.C., there's a heck of a lot of bureaucrats and White House personnel researching Indian treaties. Now, until those treaty questions are resolved, you're going to have many more wounded knees around this country. And we don't want to see that, because that involves Indian lives. The taking away of Indian lives, the threat of imprisonment of Indian people. We don't want to see any more wounded knees. So consequently, we need our treaty rights answered to.
Why did Wounded Knee happen now? Why not 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
Or why not 1976, when white America has the gall to attempt to celebrate their manifest destiny birthday celebration? Why did it happen now? That you would have to ask our spiritual leaders. It just happened.
On a cold night in February 1973, a caravan rolled through the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. The cars were packed with 200 Indians, men and women, local Oglala Lakota, and members of the urban militant group, the American Indian Movement. They headed toward the hallowed ground of Wounded Knee, the site of the last massacre of the Indian Wars.
Going into Wounded Knee that night, when it was dark and scary, and we were clinging to our weapons tightly. There was a full moon, and we knew that a battle was going to come. I was sitting there thinking of some of these young men that are around me. Am I committing them to die?
I was ready to do whatever it takes for change. I didn't care. I had children, and for them, I figured I could make a stand here.
They were up to no good. I mean, why would they be traveling in a caravan with all these weapons and all these Molotov cocktails if they weren't going to engage in some kind of destructive activity?
What exactly is an order follower by definition? An order follower is a person who does what someone else commands them to do, and who has therefore attempted to abdicate their free will and their personal responsibility for choosing their own actions based upon correct determination of the morality or immorality of a particular behavior. That is the definition of what an order follower is and does. Okay, so they're just acting en route based on what someone else told them to do without making conscious judgments regarding whether that behavior is morally right or morally wrong. That's the definition. There are three main types of order followers. I call the first type the abdicators, the people who attempt to abdicate their personal responsibility. These are individuals who do what they are told to do by a perceived superior without first judging for themselves whether or not the action they've been ordered to perform is morally right or wrong. They're attempting to abdicate personal responsibility for that judgment call. Those are probably the largest group of order followers. Most order followers fall into this category. The second group is who I call the well-intentioned, and we're going to talk about intention versus reality later on, the well-intentioned but incorrect. These are individuals who erroneously believe that they have correctly determined the morality of an action that they have been commanded to perform, and so they then willfully choose to carry it out. They believe that they are doing the right thing, in other words, although that belief is not true. It is an incorrect belief. And then there are the people who just don't give a damn. There's something deeply broken in them, possibly genetically broken. These are the psychopaths, whether primary or secondary psychopaths. These are individuals who consciously do recognize the immorality of an action that they have been commanded to perform, yet they willfully choose to carry it out anyway, knowing fully that it is wrong and violates someone else's rights. That's who I call the psychopaths. They just don't care, and they're going to do violence anyway because they just want to. Those are the three kinds of order followers. I have tremendous respect for this individual because he is a former order follower who developed a true conscience. He got out of the cult of ultimate evil and started exposing it. And he's going to interview a member, an active member of this cult, as we will see that it is, a typical order follower. So I'll let this video speak for itself.
So you swore an oath with your life to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and you have no idea what that means.
Hey, sounds good to me, sir, if that's the way you want to put it.
Really? That's it?
That's it.
That sounds pretty dangerous. It sounds like following orders without question.
Nope, I just do what I'm told by my leaders, so that's pretty much it. I leave the politics to other people.
So you do follow orders without question?
From my leaders, yes.
Yeah. So if they told you to do something that was immoral, you wouldn't question it. You wouldn't wonder what the basis of that was, or where that order came from, or what its real purpose was. You just do it because someone told you to, and they're paying your paycheck.
Hey, whatever you want to say, sir.
Hey, don't call me sir. I was a sergeant.
There you go.
I worked for a living.
Okay.
But I got out and I found out what was wrong with following orders without questioning them, and I found out that when I was in Fallujah in 2004 with the Marine Corps Civil Affairs team, we weren't really serving the people or protecting people. We were serving the politicians and the banksters and the war profiteers. I mean, doesn't that bother you to know that you're a pawn in all that, and that you allow it to happen by just following orders without question?
Hey, whatever way you feel, sir.
Well, I'm asking how you feel.
Well, it's not really important how I feel.
Feelings have been conditioned out of you? You're a soldier now?
However you feel, sir.
Would you be interested in having a little a more understanding of your oath and commitment to the Constitution that you swore an oath to support and defend?
I'm good the way I am, sir.
Really? Doesn't that make you part of the problem?
Hey, if there's a problem, I'm not aware of it.
Is ignorance bliss?
Could be, sir.
Could be. I don't think you're as dumb as you make yourself out to be. I think you're playing me off.
Might be, sir.
You might be.
That is a member of a cult.
By the 1970s, native people, once masters of the continent, had become invisible, consigned to the margins of American life. Their anger and frustration would explode in Wounded Knee.
We were about to be obliterated culturally. Our spiritual way of life, our entire way of life was about to be stamped out. And this was a rebirth of our dignity and self-pride.
For the next 71 days, Indian protesters at Wounded Knee would hold off the federal government at gunpoint. Media from around the world would give the siege day-by-day coverage, and Native Americans from across the nation would come to Wounded Knee to be part of what they hoped would be a new beginning.
The message that went out is that a band of Indians could take on this government. Tecumseh had his day, and Geronimo, Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and we had ours.
We have tonight one of the strangest stories to come along in a long time. A group of American Indians has taken over the town of Wounded Knee in South Dakota, and they have been holding it for nearly a whole day. The This afternoon, the FBI said the Indians are in charge of the town.
We had just finished eating our dinner, and so I looked out the window and I said, well, for heaven's sake, who opened the store? And they're carrying things out, bringing things out by the carload. And I was floored, just floored.
After stripping bare the Wounded Knee trading post, the village's only store, the protesters took over a local church, holding the minister and other white residents hostage. They quickly blocked all roads leading into town.
On Tuesday, February 27th, I received a telephone call from some news outlet. I was told that the caravan forcibly took over the village, were holding hostages and causing destruction there. So I immediately got my agents together and I proceeded to the main entrance to Wounded Knee.
We saw a Fed car coming, and then it was it kind of came, drove just right up, kind of not too far off. So when they come on, they got out of the car, they went looking around, and as soon as they put the glasses up, we opened up on them, let them know we are here, and that's far enough.
I called inside Wounded Knee, and I said, look, let's get together and have a meeting so we can stop the potential for bloodshed here. Let's talk about this. As I walked up to them, I see all these rifles pointed at me, and it gives you an uneasy feeling.
Yes, sir. Joseph Trimbach with the FBI.
Trimbach came to that roadblock, and you could tell he'd been up all night. And he's very irritable.
And we have law enforcement back here that's armed, and we have hostages here.
I have no idea what's going to happen next. They came out and gave me this list of demands.
The protesters called for a federal investigation of corruption on reservations in South Dakota and immediate Senate hearings on broken treaties with Indian nations.
The headquarters of the Sioux people.
We're angry about losing our land, losing our language, being ripped off of our ability to live as Indian people. Our parents was telling us, you have to walk the white man road. Indian ways are going to be gone. Be a Christian. You know, go to school and learn that English, but don't learn your own language. We wanted to give our lives in such a way that would bring attention to what was happening in Indian country. And we were pretty sure that we were going to have to give our lives.
The protesters demanded one change close to home. Through a translator, the Lakota chief Fool's Crow called for the immediate ouster of Dick Wilson, the elected head of the tribal government there on Pine Ridge.
Wilson molested the Indians, sometimes threatening them and so forth. Before the sun set, we want him out of office, and there will be no trouble.
My initial reaction was, this is something way beyond my pay grade, that someone in Washington is going to have to handle this.
Not good.
The standoff was unfolding on the Pine Ridge Reservation, home to the Oglala Lakota, not far from where chiefs like Red Cloud, Sitting Bull, and Crazy Horse had once led their people into battle.
The Lakota, who Americans call the Sioux, are iconic in American history and the American imagination. These are buffalo hunters who lived in teepees, who were at the battle with General Custer. Nearly everything about the Lakota life is firmly implanted in the way that Americans think about Indians.
By 1973, the Lakota way of life on the plains was largely in the past. The Oglala Sioux tribal government ran things on Pine Ridge. And where traditional chiefs had once sought consensus, elected Chairman Dick Wilson ruled with an iron hand.
He was like a Chicago ward boss from the 1930s. Big flour sack of a guy, wore dark glasses inside and out, was fond of drinking, and brought all his friends and family and cronies into office with him, in effect, gave them jobs on the federal payroll.
On the Pine Ridge Reservation, as with most reservations, the tribal chairman and the council have a great deal of power to spread money around, to spread food around, or to withhold it, or to favor one part of the reservation over another, which is what was happening.
Wilson favored mixed-race, assimilated Indians like himself, and slighted the traditional Sioux who spoke their language, practiced their religion, and remained loyal to the traditional Oglala chiefs.
Do you get any help from the tribal council?
No. Dickie Wilson's the president here. He's the worst one, I think. I mean, he's the, I don't know, he gets the most favorite thing.
The federal census, I think every decade through the mid to end of the 20th century, show Pine Ridge as the poorest jurisdiction in the United States. So there's poverty, and then there's reservation poverty.
When traditional Oglalas challenged corruption in tribal government, Dick Wilson responded with force.
He had his own army, which intimidated the full bloods mostly, the traditional people. His goons started beating up the people, and no charges were ever pressed. And if they did, they got thrown out of court. He controlled the whole reservation.
Some of the officers hated to arrest any of Dick's people, in spite of the fact that they did break the law. He helped me a number of times. So I felt that I owed him a loyalty. And so I didn't support everything he did, but irregardless of what he did, I still felt that loyalty.
Well, there's been a lot of accusations made here lately, and one in particular that upsets me is the fact that I am using a goon squad, so to speak. They are respectable and honest citizens of Pine Ridge.
And we're all sharpshooters. Come to goon squad. Come in and go and get them.
In late 1972, traditional Oglalas came together to push for Wilson's removal.
They started a civil rights commission, Oglala Sioux Civil Rights Commission. And from there, they got the documentation of the corruption, of the misuse of funds. They got the evidence.
And eventually the civil rights, they had a stack about 1.5 inches thick of all the testimony and violations, civil rights violations. Nobody ever got charged.
Prompted by the dissidents, the Tribal Council held impeachment hearings in February 1973. But Wilson intimidated witnesses, strong-armed council members, and managed to survive. Many Oglalas felt they had one last, desperate option.
We've always been peaceful and pretty much mind our own business and making our living and raising our family. Law-abiding. Well, I believe that the time has come that we have to commit violence in order to be heard. Now, I don't want to see anybody killed or anything, but the time's going to come when violence might have to be committed in order to wake the people up.
By the second day of the siege, the spectacle of armed Indians holding a town and 11 hostages had put the U.S. government on full alert.
By this morning, the entire area was blocked off by police. There were roadblocks as far away as the Nebraska state line.
On the far rise is roadblock 1. We have further roadblocks around the perimeter, which encompasses approximately a 15-mile area.
The director said, tell Trimbach he can have anything he wants, which was pretty neat because that was like a blank check. So I had agents go up to Rapid City and buy every rifle they could find in the city, because we needed them like right now. So they came down, and now we at least had rifles for protection instead of just sight-ons.
The military response is overwhelming. It involves plans using the U.S. Army to put down this rebellion. Clearly there are people within the federal government who see a need to take it to the limit.
I was awakened. There was a deep rumbling, droning noise, and we were looking around, and we were surrounded by armored personnel carriers, APCs.
All of a sudden we saw these 2 fighter jets coming, and they circled around, and from the south they just came right at us. We thought it was over. That's napalm. Dennis Banks pulled out his pistol, and he started firing. Boom, 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 boom. Then they were gone. You know, it was that proverbial last act of defiance. You know, here's that little mouse, and here comes the big, huge eagle. And the little mouse is standing there like this.
On the afternoon of the second day, South Dakota Senators George McGovern and James Abourezk arrived. They hoped that if they could resolve the issue of the hostages, the crisis at Wounded Knee could be ended quickly.
When they came in, it was very newsworthy. They came in with the news media. That's how the networks got in. And they said, we want to see the hostages.
I thought it was a deterrent.
The agreement I'd had with Russell Means was that if we landed at Pine Ridge, he would release the hostages.
I have an indication through an intermediary that they will release part of the hostages.
And I said, well, where are the hostages? You're supposed to release them. You agreed to release them. So they're standing over there. So I went over and I said, you folks, we rescued you. You can leave now.
But not anywhere.
If you wanted to leave the Wounded Knee area, could you go?
We're sitting there on pins and needles.
Asked him, but we had the people with him and said that they can leave.
And Mrs. Gildersleeve, the matriarch, we're not hostages. We're going to remain here. It's your fault that these Indians are here. Have you listened to them? You know, we're not leaving because you'll kill them if we leave.
Once they realized no one was being held hostage, the senators hoped to persuade the protesters to stand down by offering to convene hearings on their concerns sometime in the future.
We knew that a put-off, a stalling tactic would happen once there was no threat to any other lives other than Indian lives. You are going to walk away from here and say, after a while, Dokshalo, you know? And we're not going for Doksha anymore. We're not going for later anymore, Senator. I told you over the phone that a vet and everybody here and down there have vet with their lives.
AIM decided that their strategy would be to confront the government and try to win the public relations battle. Prior to that time, being a Mr. Nice Guy didn't really work with the government. They didn't give a damn. So that's the reason that AIM thought this was the way to do it.
250 armed U.S. personnel now surrounded the village of Wounded Knee.
I felt good. This is why AIM was alive. This is why we came to be. To stand up against the FBI, stand up against the U.S. Marshals, stand up against goons, you know, tribal police. And inside, we've got freedom. Don't let nobody in.
Since its founding in 1968, the American Indian movement had been divisive, its militant tactics controversial even among Native people. Created in Minneapolis by young urban Indians fed up with police harassment, the group had shown a knack for generating publicity. Members had seized high-profile symbols, Plymouth Rock, the Mayflower, Mount Rushmore, and in November 1972 had occupied and vandalized the Washington headquarters of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Weeks later, in early 1973, AIM took its campaign into the reservation border towns of South Dakota.
In those days, there was a tremendous amount of racism, especially in the border towns around the reservations. I mean, real racism, where Indians are practically invisible.
There was towns you didn't drive through, didn't go through, especially women. You didn't walk down the street of any border town by yourself because you'd be accosted by any white man that felt like it.
Just weeks before the occupation of Wounded Knee, a white man killed an Indian near Custer, South Dakota, 50 miles from Pine Ridge. When local officials charged him with manslaughter, not murder, 200 angry AIM protesters came to town.
And you charge a white man premeditated murder. You charge him with second-degree manslaughter. And we ain't going for it anymore. And I know this whole damn town is an armed camp.
Hey, listen, white man, I have had all the bullshit from your race as I can take.
And you charge a white man premeditated murder. You charge him with second-degree manslaughter. And we ain't going for it anymore. And I know this whole damn town is an armed camp.
Hey, listen, white man, I have had all the bullshit from your race as I can take.
When police barred them from entering the courthouse, AIM members forced their way in.
Open them doors up. Go in, go in.
Just as we walked in through the door, then we were attacked by law enforcement. We were fighting, and they come at me with a nightstick, so I blocked it and took it away and started using it on them.
I know I was right on the steps, and things were happening. We bloodied the guy, we took the helmet away, we bloodied him up. Then I ran across to help get gas from the filling station. We were filling up, making Molotov cocktails and busting the bottles on the building, and the fire just started on the wall and everything.
Protesters set the courthouse ablaze and left Custer in shambles.
There was absolutely an element in AIM that considered itself a revolutionary organization who were comfortable being around guns, who absolutely loved the idea of AIM being outlaws, who just wanted to get it on.
The confrontation in Custer caught the attention of the Oglala dissidents on Pine Ridge. 3 weeks later, when their campaign to impeach Dick Wilson failed, they asked AIM for help.